It is nearly week 4, and that means it's one of the best windows for you to be making some trades on your Dynasty teams. As we enter the season, players start to enter a bit of a redraft mentality, which means that you can use that bias to start manipulating to make some favourable trades for your team. In this video, I'm going to be looking at 5 players who you can buy low on right now, even though they're underperforming in the 2025 season so far. It has only been 3 games, and we have a bigger sample size to rely on for these players, meaning that you know you can extract value for these trades. If you like content like this, please consider liking and subscribing. But we are going to kick off with one of the biggest disappointments of the season so far, and that is Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. BTJ finished as the wide receiver 7 in PPR in his rookie season, despite being a little bit of an under-the-radar prospect. Went in the first round, but was seen as a clear tier below those 3 amazing wide receiver prospects in Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze, but exploded in his rookie season. Then this offseason, it was wheels up for BTJ. Liam Cohen came in as the new head coach, so we had someone that had forged a system that had worked incredibly in Tampa Bay. Alongside that, Travis Hunter was brought in as the team's new wide receiver 2 / cornerback 3, but that's not the question for this video. So it meant that there was a talented wide receiver opposite him who could take away some of the coverage. De'Ami Brown also brought in as a deep threat, so meaning that he was, as a burner, he can open up the middle of the field and some of those horizontal routes on which BTJ can thrive. But it's been so disappointing for Brian Thomas Jr. so far this season. On 25 targets, he's translated that to just 7 receptions, and he's one of the most disappointing fantasy picks in the league so far. Brian Thomas was going at around the wide receiver 7 or 8 slot in redraft and is currently valued as the consensus wide receiver 5 in Keep Trade Cut in Dynasty rankings, but on the season so far in PPR is the wide receiver 54, despite seeing an unbelievable target share. Now, the interesting thing for me is trying to diagnose some of the reasons why this is taking place, and I've been looking into the all-22 of the Jags offense, and to be honest, when I look into it, despite the fact the offense is completely stumbling, I think it's a really well-schemed offense. I think they're doing good work to work horizontally, to rely on some of that yards after the catch that the Bucs led the league in last year, and we know that Liam Cohen loves, and I think Trevor Lawrence has actually played much better than people seem to be giving him credit for. My thing for Brian Thomas Jr. is looking at him. I think he has the yips, I think he's in his own head, and I think it's more mental than physical. The target share is still elite, and we should see it continue in this way, especially as Travis Hunter seems to be being taken off the field to go play defense a little bit more because he's struggling as a wide receiver at this point in time. So the target share probably isn't going to go down. What we want to see is the coaches really getting into Thomas and really talking with him about what's happening up here so that it can translate to down here as well. When you look at some of the effort levels, they've just not quite been there, but the route running is still there, the electric speed is still there, everything is in place to still make Brian Thomas Jr. the explosive wide receiver that he was in his rookie season. And that kind of talent doesn't just disappear. But already this season, I've seen some examples on social media of people trading away BTJ on the cheap, which means if you're smart, and I know you are if you're watching this channel, and you should subscribe, by the way, I know if you're smart, you get a leverage point to be able to do the flip side. I've seen BTJ traded away for Ricky Pearsall and a 2nd round pick, which is a ludicrous move to me. The talent is clearly still there. There's something not clicking at the moment, and potentially actually the percentage of horizontal routes is starting to go down for Brian Thomas Jr., and that was really high last year. So maybe being used horizontally rather than vertically is a way to get the ball into his hands easier, but the talent's still there. He's still the same player that we saw last year. It's just not clicking just yet. So buy the damn dip while it's not clicking and pay dividends when it starts to click and he becomes the same receiver that we thought he was. In terms of a couple of trades that I would make for him, and one of these players actually on KTC is ranked over Brian Thomas Jr., which I think is mental. But looking at some of that next tier of wide receivers, or in Ricky Pearsall's case, to me, a fair few tiers down, and see if you can get some leverage there to upgrade to a player that, yeah, might not be doing as much for a redraft team right now, but you want to be building around in Dynasty. So Zay Flowers, Emeka Egbuka, who is currently ranked straight up over BTJ, but I would prefer Thomas, and Ricky Pearsall, who I actually have quite low, and I need to see him perform to this level with Brandon Ayuk and Juwan Jennings and George Kittle in the offense, because yeah, he's a target hog right now, but it's probably not going to last when those other players get back into the lineup as well. The next player that I want to talk about is in a relatively similar position, being really highly drafted in redraft and being really disappointing so far, and that is Chargers wide receiver Ladd McConkey, and it's even another sophomore receiver that we wanted to see take a jump. Obviously, he was amazing last year, but one of the issues was that the Chargers were way too run heavy. Now, if you said before the season that the Chargers had the highest targets to the wide receiver position, the third highest percentage of targets to the position, and were one of the leaders in the league in neutral pass rate, you would assume that Ladd McConkey was absolutely breaking loose. And it's just not been the case just yet. He has been quite disappointing, but when you look at some of the underlying numbers, the talent is clearly still there. Quentin Johnston is running incredibly pure on touchdowns right now, and Keenan Allen is becoming a bit more of a target hog than we want to see. But when you look at the target numbers, QJ and McConkey are just underneath Keenan Allen, who is completely free at the top, but only by 2 targets. And when you look at catch rate as well, Ladd McConkey's is so far clear of QJ and Keenan Allen. I still believe that he is the most exciting and most talented wide receiver on this team, and I think over time it's going to start to balance out in the other way. Quentin Johnston's a really interesting one. I think a lot of it is that they are scheming him up in a different way, so his ADOT has significantly dropped. They know that, yes, he has electric speed, but his ball tracking is terrible. He's not going to be able to catch the ball deep down the field. He's going to lose sight of it, and his hands are just big bricks whacking together. So they're using him underneath and getting the ball in his hands early. I'm not confident yet if the breakout is real. I think I need a few more games to be able to tell for sure, but Keenan Allen is an older player and is going to start to fade as the season gets on, or even in future as well. Justin Herbert is playing at an MVP level right now. To be honest, if I'm looking across the league, he might be my front runner for MVP, but it's only 3 weeks, so really difficult to tell just yet. Ladd McConkey is an incredible route runner, incredible technician, and a fantastic athlete as well, and is not going to just drop off the radar because 2 weapons have emerged. I firmly still believe that he is the best wide receiver on this team, and that is going to show out across the course of the season. So the buy window for him is probably going to be relatively short, because I think you need to get him now before he has that explosive game. In terms of trades for him, to be honest, it's relatively similar to what I'd pay for Brian Thomas, and see if you can get a decent bit of a deal for him. But maybe looking at the next tier down of wide receiver, I think he's only just above Zay Flowers, and maybe in a similar tier to Emeka Egbuka. So if you can trade someone like George Pickens for him, or look towards Ricky Pearsall, that is a great idea for me. George Pickens, obviously, the sell window's opened up because CeeDee Lamb's injured, but if you can make a move of a player that might be performing a bit better right now to upgrade your Dynasty wide receiver core to a player that is going to be better in the long term, that is a win move for me. If you're enjoying this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. There is so much more content to come as we get into the season, whether it is my weekly waiver wire videos, my weekly Dynasty trade videos, or my off the wire series, where I take a Dynasty team completely built off the waiver wire and try and make it into a champion. It's not there yet, and it's not going to be there for a while, but we're going to get there eventually because we have confidence in ourselves. Click the button down below to get involved in all the great content I have coming your way, and leave a like and a comment while you're there as well. It doesn't take very much. Click done, and Lewis very happy. Colston Loveland has been really disappointing to start off this season. For the first couple of weeks, he was losing out on snaps to Cole Kmet. In week 3, he was out-touching Cole Kmet and out-snapping him and seeing the field way early, and they were actually forcing the ball his way, and then he left midway through the game with an injury, which was quite disappointing. He saw 3 targets early on, and then he left the game. When a rookie underperforms, but potentially it's because they're not actually getting targeted, they're not seeing the ball, less so that they just can't catch, or they just don't look the same player they were in college, that's a window for you to go and get them. Colston Loveland had actually usurped Tyler Warren as the consensus tight end 1 in this class in rookie drafts, going at around the 107 or 108. Tyler Warren is unbelievable so far and is outperforming Colston Loveland by a long way. Potentially looks like one of the best tight ends in the NFL. And like, I'll hold my hands up, I was wrong on Tyler Warren. It just looks the same level of physical dominance that we've seen elsewhere. But Colston Loveland, if you drafted him, you're probably panicking right now because you might have drafted him to be your tight end one for this season. I spoke a lot about thinking that I thought he was going to be redraft relevant. He's just not just yet. I think he will be down the stretch, or potentially you'll have to wait until next year for him to be an every down player and a focal point of this offense. But that gives you a window. And if you're rebuilding, if you have some of the tight ends you can see down here, so if you have Juwan Johnson, if you have Harold Fannin, if you have Dalton Kincaid, who I don't particularly like but has been scoring so far, now's your window to go and make a move. You can potentially add a 3 on top of each player if the person that owns Colston Loveland is panicking and wants to get out, but now is the window to go and grab a player who I think is going to be the focal point of the Bears offense going forwards. It just hasn't clicked yet. But you don't take a tight end that early and not feature them. So I think towards the second half of the season, it's probably going to start happening for Loveland. Moving away completely from rookies, sophomores, younger players it's not just clicking for just yet, the next player I want you to go and target is Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin last year was absolutely unbelievable until an ankle injury. Calling it an ankle injury is massive understatement. His ankle turned the wrong way round on the field. That obviously ended his season and is taking him until now to start getting back onto the field. But Chris Godwin's pace through the games he played last year would have seen him finish as the wide receiver 2. He was unbelievable. He was the focal point of the Bucs offense, which was really thriving, as I said earlier in the Brian Thomas Jr. section, with that yards after the catch, with the quick passing game and getting the ball into Chris Godwin's hands early so that he could make plays with it. Chris Godwin is still a fantastic player. He's much younger than you think. He's only 29 and is going to come back if he's healthy and be a focal point of this offense. Emeka Egbuka has showed an ability to win lining up anywhere across the formation, and Mike Evans is going to miss some time. So I feel confident that Chris Godwin is going to come straight back into that starting slot role that we saw him absolutely dominate in last season. But the reason the buy window is right now is because you need to get him before he comes back onto the field. If he is healthy, if his body is fully recovered, and I feel confident that it will be because they've taken their time and not forced him back where maybe he would have been able to come back onto the field earlier, then I think Chris Godwin's going to step straight in and be a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type, but is not really being treated as such just now. I would be more than happy to pay a 2026 second for him, but to be honest, I don't think you need to. I think you can probably pay something slightly less. Maybe you can look towards a outperforming wide receiver who is also a veteran. Cooper Kupp is an example that I've given. I also mentioned Davante Adams, but to be honest, since I've made this graphic, I've probably changed my mind on that because Davante's been really good so far this season. So maybe not Davante, but maybe looking towards a veteran. Keenan Allen might even be a good idea. Seeing if you can get him for a 2 or for 3 threes, even if someone is just panicked that his career is over. There is a lot of juice left in Chris Godwin, and I want to buy in before he hits the field and people realise what they've had on their IR spot. The last player that I want to talk about, we're going back to sophomore players who were disappointing, and that's Bo Nix. Bo Nix obviously had a stellar rookie season, made a real case for Offensive Rookie of the Year, and defied all expectations in a really solid quarterback class, was easily the second best quarterback in the class last season, and was fantastic for fantasy football as well. It's just not worked out that way for him so far this season. He's not really been using his legs, and the offense has just seemed overly complicated and not really piecing itself together, despite Troy Franklin starting to emerge as a bona fide weapon. Sean Payton is likely to start changing things around. He's a very adaptable coach to be able to get Bo Nix more involved, particularly using his legs as well. Now, it might not be that he scrambles or has design runs as much as he did last year, but Nix is a very mobile quarterback. He's a very accurate quarterback, especially in the short game, and if they can start to scheme things open in a different way, that fancy relevancy is going to continue to emerge. I compare Nix to someone like CJ Stroud, who had a massive sophomore slump and, to be honest, continued to slump ever since. The difference is that Nix is more suited to being a fancy relevant quarterback, whereas CJ Stroud hasn't finished as a top 12 quarterback in about 30 games. Because Nix is more mobile, there's more upside for him to score fantasy points, so he's someone that I'd be looking to buy right now. The two quarterbacks that I've mentioned you can potentially add to be able to get him is Daniel Jones and Jackson Dart. Now, these are two quarterbacks, obviously, with a fair amount of hype to them right now. The Indiana Jones, as he's being called, has been one of the best quarterbacks this season so far, particularly for fantasy football, and Jackson Dart is someone that the community is really hyping up in advance of making his debut this week for the Giants. To be honest, I would much rather Nix over either of them, so I'd be willing to add a fair amount on top to get that deal done. But one of the best things we can do in Dynasty is capitalize on the hype of a player that we don't think is going to continue to produce, to buy a player that's underperforming that we think is going to come back into form and has a much higher ceiling. And I think it's undisputable that Bo Nix's ceiling in the long term is way beyond that of Daniel Jones, and I think Jackson Dart as well, just based off how he was as a prospect. So if this is a buy window, I'm going to be buying Bo Nix every day of the week.